So I just did a video about Michael Bloomberg getting obliterated in the debates, and Bernie Sanders played a huge role in that. But I wanted to do a separate video about Bernie Sanders' performance during the debates last night because he was exceptional. He really maintained his status as the front runner. He didn't have to really get his hands dirty the whole time because you had Elizabeth Warren taking care of Mike Bloomberg. Even Joe Biden was pitching in, and you had infighting between Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg. So a lot of the candidates were doing a little infighting, and Bernie Sanders was kind of just laid back, in the background. And when he needed to, when he was confronted, when he was called out, he came in swinging, okay? So he really maintained his status as the front runner. I don't think anything has changed with the dynamic of this Democratic primary so far, and that's a good thing, right? So he emerges from this debate victorious, and he did a great performance. So there are several moments where, he took on the moderators, he took on Mike Bloomberg, and we're going to go through them right now. So the first thing that happened is you had one of the moderators asking him about democratic socialism. Let's take a look.
Senator Sanders, our latest NBC News Wall Street Journal poll released yesterday, 2/3 of all voters said they were uncomfortable with a socialist candidate for president. What do you say to those voters, sir?
What was the result of that poll? Who was winning?
The question's to you.
Well, the question was that I was winning, and I think by a fairly comfortable margin. Might mention that. But here is the point. Let's talk about democratic socialism, not communism, Mr. Bloomberg. That's a cheap shot. Let's talk about democratic. Let's talk about what goes on in countries like Denmark, where Pete correctly pointed out they have a much higher quality of life in many respects than we do. What are we talking about? We are living in many ways in a socialist society right now. Problem is, as Dr. Martin Luther King reminded us, we have socialism for the very rich, rugged individualism for the poor.
Wait a second.
Let me finish. When Donald Trump gets $800 million in tax breaks and subsidies to build luxury condominiums, that's socialism for the rich. When Walmart, we have to subsidize Walmart's workers who are on Medicaid and food stamps because the wealthiest family in America pays starvation wages. That's socialism for the rich. I believe in democratic socialism for working people, not billionaires. Health care for all, educational opportunity for all.
Senator, thank you. Mayor
Creating
Bloomberg,
a government that works for all, not just
socialism.
What a wonderful country we have. The best-known socialist in the country happens to be a millionaire with 3 houses. What I miss here?
Well, you'll miss that I work in Washington, house 1.
That's the first problem.
Live in Burlington, house 2.
That's good.
And like thousands of other Vermonters, I do have a summer camp. Forgive me for that. Where is your home? Which tax haven do you have your home?
New York City, thank you very much. And I pay all my taxes.
Oh, that line about the tax haven, that was brutal. Exactly, man. Exactly. He hit the nail on the head. I mean, that was just amazing. It was beautiful. Bernard Sanders came out swinging. That was so hilarious when he goes to Lester Holt. What was the result of that poll, huh? Where it has Bernie Sanders leading. He doesn't tell him that, does he? Also, I'm pretty sure a majority of young voters are in favor of a socialist candidate. That's why they're galvanized. That's why you have a high voter turnout, a high mobilization of young people since 2016. That's what Bernie Sanders started. He did that single-handedly. He involved more people in the democratic process. Although, again, Bernie Sanders is not a socialist in the term that you think of communism. No. But that was really good how he handled Lester Holt. The silence. He's like, I asked you the question. The silence. He just owned him. Again, Bernie Sanders crushing it. For a moment there, just for a tiny moment, it looked like Bloomberg had taken command of the situation. It's like, oh, you have 3 houses, huh? You hypocrite. You hypocrite. What? It already makes no sense. And then Bernie Sanders hits him with the, where's your house? Where are your tax havens, huh? Oh, that was lovely. That was beautiful. Mwah. I love that. Bernie Sanders just nailed it. This is the Bernie that I've been wanting to see for a while. You've seen me say this before. I want him to take off the gloves. This is what I mean. This is really when you have a sharp tongue and you bring out the truth. You hit him with the truth, Bernard. He did it perfectly, man. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. It's so funny. Like you see these right-wing 23-year-old white males online, all these MAGA guys who think they're woke. talking about, oh, Bernie Sanders is such a hypocrite because he wants to tax the rich, but look at him, he's a millionaire and he has 3 houses. No, Bernie Sanders wants to tax the rich that are hiding their money in tax havens. Bernie Sanders wants to tax the rich that won't pay their workers a fair share. Bernie Sanders wants the billionaires, like the Waltons or the Walmart family, to pay their workers good wages, and so they don't have to rely on government programs like Medicaid and food stamps. He wants an equilibrium. He wants a leveling out of wealth. Not all the wealth going to a select few, and then the majority of the people are left with nothing. So the fact that Bernie Sanders has 3 houses is ridiculous. I mean, just like he said, one of them is in Burlington. That's where he's been the mayor. That's where he lives. That's his residence. And then he has to have another one in Washington because he's a goddamn senator. What do you want him to do? Live in a hotel? It's ridiculous. This mentality is so ridiculous. The guy literally works away from home. He has to go to Washington. So of course he has a second house there. Are you stupid or something? This is so ridiculous. What a cheap shot. This makes absolutely no sense. Bernie Sanders could have 0 houses and they would still try to go after him. It's just like with AOC. You know, AOC, she used to be a bartender and they used that against her, that she's been a working class woman, a woman of color that's from the working class. They said, oh, she has no experience, right? She's not from Washington. But when you are from Washington, they also use that against you. You can't win with them, right? It's so stupid. And it's absolutely irrelevant to the message of the movement, which is that you have all the wealth that's being created by the majority, by the working class, going to a select few. And this is not just in America. This is a phenomenon that has been happening globally. We have studies about this. We have statistics. We have facts. We have numbers. This is undeniable. The fact that Bernie Sanders wrote a New York Times bestseller has nothing to do with the fact that people are making starvation wages. Those 2 things are completely irrelevant. Even if Bernie Sanders didn't exist, the issue is still there about people making starvation wages. The existence of Bernie Sanders and his 1 million or whatever, how much he has, is irrelevant. This is the real issue here. You have people like Mike Bloomberg that are hiding and hoarding their wealth abroad in the Cayman Islands, places like the Caribbean, so they don't have to pay any money, so they don't have to be taxed. And it's ridiculous. I mean, they're so obscenely rich already that even if you did tax them, they would still be obscenely rich. And someone like Mike Bloomberg has openly said that he's against raising wages. He absolutely loathes the working class. He has a true hatred for minorities, and it's absolutely disgusting. I can't understand that he's even polling at more than 1%. The fact that he's polling at all. So there was a moment where Pete Buttigieg, he tries to go after Bernie Sanders, and it's just so pathetic. Take a look.
Yes, we've got to wake up as a party. We could wake up 2 weeks from today, the day after Super Tuesday, and the only candidates left standing will be Bernie Sanders and Mike Bloomberg, the 2 most polarizing figures on this stage. And most Americans don't see where they fit if they've got to choose between a socialist who thinks that capitalism is the root of all evil and a billionaire who thinks that money ought to be the root of all power. Let's put forward somebody who actually lives and works in a middle-class neighborhood in an industrial Midwestern city. Let's put forward somebody who's actually a Democrat. Look, we shouldn't have to choose between one candidate who wants to burn this party down and another candidate who wants to buy this party out. Look, we can do better.
Senator Sanders, are you polarizing?
If speaking to the needs and the pain of a long-neglected working class is polarizing, I think you got the wrong word. What we are trying finally to do is to give a voice to people who, after 45 years of work, are not making a nickel more than they did 45 years ago. We are giving a voice to people who are saying we are sick and tired of billionaires like Mr. Bloomberg seeing huge expansions of their wealth while 500,000 people sleep out on the street tonight. And that's so what we are saying, Pete, is maybe it's a time for the working class of this country to have a little bit of power in Washington rather than your billionaire campaign contributors.
All right, look, first of all,
I know.
Look, my campaign is fueled by hundreds of thousands of contributors,
including 46 billionaires.
Among the hundreds.
Oh, I loved it. I love it. I love it. That was so good. That was so good. They were feeling the burn. They were feeling the burn. Get this man some ice. He just got burned by Bernie Sanders. That was perfect. Thank God. I'm so happy. It's so exhilarating to see Bernie Sanders finally taking on his true form, taking off the gloves, calling them out, calling the scum out for what they are. And it's such a brilliant response because Pete Buttigieg, he tries to polarize them effectively. You know, he's saying that, oh, Mike Bloomberg, he's too capitalist, you know, he's too rich, too much of a billionaire, and Bernie Sanders is too left. He's a socialist, and Americans, they don't want to choose that. No, this is a false narrative. Bernie Sanders is not polarizing. Like I said before, if you put Bernie Sanders in Britain or France or Germany, he's a center politician. He's a centrist. He's not advocating for communism. He's just saying people need healthcare and good wages. Stop exploiting workers. That's it. That's it. And he's, like he said, people haven't had a wage increase in 40 years. You know, if you were working in 1968, you had more purchasing power in 1968 than you do now. There have been no wage increases to account for inflation in the last 40 years. But you know what has happened in the last 40 years? The billionaires, the 1%, they've seen their wealth increase. They've reaped all the benefits of capitalism. They've reaped all the benefits of the labor that the working class created. That has happened. That's for sure. But when you look at the working class, the middle class, they have seen no wage increase. You had more purchasing power in 1968. And boy, the music was much better. Just take a look at Jimmy right there. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you were a worker, you're a middle class individual in the 1960s, you could buy more with your money than you could now. How is that normal? We should be going forwards, not backwards or stagnating. That's unacceptable. It's completely unacceptable. And the best part of what Bernie Sanders' response is that he's saying people, the majority, the working class, the middle class, they should have more of a say than your billionaire donors. Oh, beautiful. That was the cherry on top, the icing right there, man. I mean, I'm so happy he does this. He did it last time, but this was even better. He was like yelling it. He was asserting dominance. He was calling him out. That was beautiful. And Pete Buttigieg has no rebuttal. You can see him smiling like some scheming, conniving rat. He knows that he's in the spotlight. He knows that he has no defense, and what he's doing is inexcusable, representing all these Wall Street donor class elites in Washington and elsewhere, and doing his wine caves. He's not stupid. This guy used to praise Bernie Sanders because he doesn't take corporate money, and now he's doing the complete opposite because it's politically convenient for him to do so and advance his career. So that's so good what Bernie Sanders is. Absolutely obliterated him. Really, Bernie Sanders crushed it last night. There was another part also where they talked about worker co-ops, and I'm going to show you that clip right now.
Judge, Senator Sanders has a proposal that would require all large companies to turn over up to 20% of their ownership to employees over time. Is that a good idea?
I think that employee ownership of companies is a great idea. I'm not sure it makes sense to command those companies to do it. If we really want to deliver less inequality in this country, then we got to start with the tax code. And we got to start with investments in how people are able to live the American dream, which is in serious decline. Matter of fact, last time I checked the list of countries to live out the American dream, in other words, to be born at the bottom, then come out at the top, we're not even in the top 10. Number one place to live out the American dream right now is Denmark. And as the, I think, lone person on this stage who's not a millionaire, let alone a billionaire, I believe that part of what needs to change is for the voices of the communities that haven't felt heard on Wall Street or in Washington to actually be brought to Capitol Hill. It's why I am building a politics designed around inclusion, designed around belonging, because the one thing that will definitely perpetuate the income inequality we're living with right now is for Donald Trump to be reelected because we polarized this country with the wrong nominee.
Senator Sanders, it's your policy.
That's to me, right?
It is your policy.
Thank you. It is my policy, and I'm very proud of that policy. All right? What we need to do to deal with this grotesque level of income and wealth inequality is make sure that those people who are working, you know what, Mr. Bloomberg, it wasn't you who made all that money. Maybe your workers played some role in that as well. And it is important that those workers are able to share the benefits. Also, when we have so many people who go to work every day and they feel not good about their jobs, they feel like cogs in a machine. I want workers to be able to sit on corporate boards as well so they can have some say over what happens to their lives.
So that was really beautiful answer by Bernie, but I just want to say one thing about Pete Buttigieg. did you see how he gives a non-answer? He says like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, but I don't think we should force companies to do it. What? Then you don't support that. Just say you don't support that. Stop trying to sugarcoat it. Yeah, I think it's a good idea, but I don't think we should force companies to do it. What? You see the lies, how he's so good at tricking people? The veneer, the facade that he puts on, it's unreal. And then he also pivots to Trump. He goes to Trump. What does Donald Trump have to do with worker co-ops? Nothing. Zero. This is ridiculous. Every single time, not just him, but all these candidates, they pivot to Trump. No one gives a goddamn about Trump. We're talking about giving workers more power and a say in their own labor. Look at this nonsense. It drives me insane. I cannot tolerate this nonsense. And the moderators do nothing. No rebuttals, no confrontations, nothing. Nothing. They just let them go on. They give him a pass. This is so bad, and people don't see through this because you have people like Pete Buttigieg who are somewhat of an acceptable orator, and they just sugarcoat it, and then they drift off, and they take you, and they pivot to go away to Trump or something completely irrelevant. It drives me nuts. And it's so funny how he said, right now, the best place to live out the American dream is Denmark. And I don't know if you caught this, but Bernie Sanders laughed when he said that.
Number one place to live out the American dream right now is Denmark. And as I think...
Do you know why? Because that's exactly what he's trying to do. He's trying to bring about the same policies and social welfare and socialism that you have in Denmark. Democratic socialism, which is really social democracy. That's what he means. That's why he laughed. Because you're trying to criticize me, you're trying to throw me under the bus, but that's exactly what I'm trying to implement. You're the one who's working against that. You're the one who's taking money from billionaire donors. I'm the one who's trying to implement that vision, like in Denmark, which you just praised. That's why Bernie Sanders laughed. That's why he laughed. Because it's really disgusting what they're doing, you know? They pretend that they're for all these nice things, but what they're doing is they're representing the elites. And so afterwards, Bernie Sanders, this is his policy after all. I did a video on this about how beautiful his plan is to give power back to the workers, put them on the corporate board so they have a say when, you know, companies want to outsource. Like you have all these manufacturing plants like Nissan, like Ford, who just said, yeah, goodbye. We're closing up, we're closing shop, and we're moving to Mexico, or we're moving to Southeast Asia or wherever. And you have tons of people who are out of work. And Donald Trump, he said that he's not going to do that. You remember Donald Trump said, I'm going to bring back manufacturing. I'm going to be tough. He didn't do anything. You have over 90,000 jobs that have been outsourced since Donald Trump took office. What did he do to stop that? Absolutely zero. No punishment to these companies, no fines, no taxes, nothing. And then you have tons of workers who've been working at these plants for maybe 20 years. Suddenly they're out of work. They're just thrown under the bus. They don't care about them because it's all about the corporate profits. And so what Bernie Sanders wants is he wants the workers to have a say in these things because they are the ones who are creating the labor. They are the ones who are doing the work. And by the way, worker co-ops is a form of socialism on its own. Again, as I said before, go and watch Dr. Richard Wolff. He's an amazing economist. He is so good at explaining things. Worker co-ops is its own form of socialism, you know, where you have this in Spain, by the way. One of the most profitable, one of the most successful companies in Spain is a worker co-op. I believe it's called the Mondragon Corporation, okay? And so this is a very important thing. You need to give the power to the workers so they can stop being exploited like they have been for the last 40 years, right? That's his plan. That's Bernie Sanders' plan. And it's brilliant. Please go watch my video on it. I broke it down in detail, the entire thing, when he put it out a few months ago. It's awesome. So, man, this debate, Bernie Sanders absolutely killed it. This was his best performance so far. I am truly thrilled and exhilarated by what he did, by all his replies, his rebuttals, when he took on Bloomberg, when he took on Pete Buttigieg. He did brilliant. He did absolutely brilliant. And he emerges as the front runner from this debate. He's going forward into Nevada, into South Carolina as the big daddy. Okay? You can't take on him. He did really well. He did exceptionally well. And I can't praise him enough. So that was awesome. And yeah, I have nothing more to say. That was it.